Bonjour, merci d'être. Thank you to be here. I'll try to speak about what I consider as a beauty or non-beauty in plants and harmony or disharmony. First of all, what's the difference between beauty and harmony? It's not so easy. I consider that beauty is something instantaneous. When you can say this flower is beautiful, a flower usually doesn't last a long time. When you speak about harmony, usually you have to consider the time. For instance, you speak about harmonious growth of a plant. Harmonious growth, it means that the plant remains beautiful always, even when she's changing. Changing for a plant, means to change the leaves. So when you have harmonious growth, it means that this includes all the steps to keep the beauty intact. And I think, because I did work and I still work on plants growing in very low energy level. I mean plants growing in the shade of tropical rainforest. So plants growing between the soil and about 3 meters in height. It means in tropical rainforest, they have only 1% of full sunlight reaching the canopy, the top of the trees of the forest. And in this case, in these low levels, plants receiving only 1% of full sunlight, it means that, of course, it's impossible to have overlapping of the leaves, because when you receive only 1% of full sunlight, you need for photosynthesis to catch all this amount of so low light level. So it means that in this case, in forest understory, the plants have to avoid to overlap the leaves. So I did show that they did create about 20 different possibilities to avoid overlapping of the leaves. So you have global shapes of the plants. Global shapes, I mean all the possibilities to install the leaves. So it's a biological architecture. It's the living architecture of the plants. So you have some plants in the shade which are spirally installed leaves, because when you have a spiral, you have steps. It's exactly like a stair. So you have plants like Costus, for instance, which are exactly like helicoidal stair. So each leaf receives the light. You have some others which have successive discs separated by enough height to have the lateral light penetrating. You have plants with leaves all vertically displayed in a kind of cylinder like this. So you have about 20 possibilities to catch this low light level. And it's very strange, because for our eyes, what is very efficient biologically, for our eyes, our mind, it is usually what we consider as beautiful. Why? Because, of course, when you have this kind of respect between each successive leaves, because the harmony, because as I did say, in this case, it lasts all the life of the plant, the harmony is due to this this really respect of each living element, because one leaf is a living element, another leaf is another living element. So you have each of them can catch the maximum of the light available. And what happens when you look at open areas? You look at these bamboos, for instance. Of course, globally, we can consider that this global shape is something quite fluffy, quite pleasant, but quite difficult to find a real harmony. Why? Because you see that in full light, all the leaves are overlapping. You have not really well-defined shapes, because they have 100% of full sunlight. So, of course, even if you have overlapping of many leaves, it's not a problem, because each leaf can receive enough light for photosynthesis. So, in this case, you have not perfect harmony at all, and especially when you destroy the forest, what happens? You have suddenly full light arriving, but also since you had forests before, you have a lot of water in the soil, you have a lot of minerals because it was a forest. So during the first weeks and the first months after destroying the forest, especially in tropical rainforest, you have a lot of plants coming, common plants, usually, which are very, very aggressive, where you have a very high level of competition between them, because all the plants catch the maximum of light, and even if they grow in a not at all harmonious way, it's not a problem because there is enough light, too much light, there is water, there are minerals. So in this case, you have very low biodiversity and very poor aesthetic results. And also, so after some months, some years, sometimes a kind of harmony comes back. For instance, when you look at these forest edges, after 1 to 5 years, you can have, for instance, plants especially of the morning glory family, of the grape family, which can create some curtains, which finally can become a little bit harmonious. But the problem, you have very, very few species, very low diversity. What is very special when you have low energy in forest understory is that you have a very high biodiversity level. You have many, many species, even in a small space. For instance, I was 3 weeks ago in Papua New Guinea, the big island in north of Australia, and in Papua New Guinea, on a single square meter, I did see 6 different species of the same family, the nettle family. You can imagine only on a surface like this, 6 species growing together of the same plant family. But because what happens in forest understory is that you have space. Why do you have space? First, the plants are growing very slowly. I told you they have to adjust their architecture to catch the very low light level. But also, we have not to forget that so they are growing slowly, but even if you go slowly, you can cover everything after many, many years. But what happens in forest understory is that the plants receive branches falling from the top, from the canopy, and you have all the animals eating the plants, insects, and also, for instance, if you think about a tapir, the big animal tapir, they eat 250 kilograms of leaves per day. So you can imagine the small plants in forest understory, but what is very important is that these plants are regularly destroyed, partly destroyed, but usually they are very efficient to recover. They recover either by rhizomes or stems inside the ground, but they can also recover by very unusual ways. For instance, when a leaf is cut and still alive, falling on the ground because it's humid and shaded. In this case, the leaf gives roots, the leaf, not the stem, the leaf gives roots, and you have a new bud appearing. So in this forest understory, the plants cannot cover everything because they are regularly destroyed, but usually not totally destroyed. So many of these plants are actually potentially immortal because, you know, we as human beings, we know we'll die one day, all animals, even the trees. A tree, even if it can reach 500 years, you know that a tree, because it has only one trunk, and finally it will fall and it will die. But when you have small plants growing all along the soil, finally these plants have new roots appearing everywhere, so they can survive for many, when I say many years, it seems that, for instance, Lycopodium, which is a very primitive genus of plants, some Lycopodium we observe today are maybe the same individual, as 300 million years ago. Of course, in this case, it means it had to withstand fluctuation of weather, and of course the dispersal of continents which have moved, so different climate, but as they are growing with repetition of the same structure all along the soil, they can follow all the climatic events and also the changes of the structure of continents. So these plants, what is very important in the case of these plants growing in the shade is that for them the death is an accident. it is not something ineluctable. It's not something which will arrive always. For animals and for trees, for all these plants of high energy level, we know we have to die one day, or even if it's very late. So you see, in this forest thunder story, they are regularly destroyed, but finally it's not a problem because they can regenerate. So if they, and I think for us it should be good if we could think that our death is accidental and not necessary. It should be good, but unfortunately we are not this kind of plant. So you see, you have really this kind of connections between beauty, harmony, as I told you for a long time, the use of energy, and we have to remember that high energy level means high possibilities of growth, of course, but high level of competition, and high level of competition means reduction of creativity. When I say creativity, I mean the number of species able to appear. So high level of energy gives competition, gives reduction of biodiversity, whereas when you have a low energy level, you have, of course, a very slow growth, but very harmonious. It's one thing, and harmonious is necessary to last a long time, and as I told you, maybe for always. And so you have no competition, you still have free space. So this is the, I think it's maybe I'm not objective because I did the work since 30 years about this low energy living creature, but I think that really we could learn as human beings something about competition or non-competition, and to remember that competition usually reduces all the creativity. Merci, merci.